Are you having a hard time figuring out what to get Dad for Father's Day? Shop now at sportshistorynetwork.com/row1 and save 15% off your order when you check out Row 1 Brand's Vintage Sports Pictorium Gallery. They have America's best sports art. With over 7,200 historic sports prints, you're assured to find something unique for Dad this Father's Day. If he's an NFL buff, check out the 1963 vintage NFL helmet poster. Shop now at sportshistorynetwork.com/row1.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Hello, sports fans, and welcome to another edition of Yesterday Sports on the Sports History Network. I grew up as a fan of the New York Knicks. The Knicks were a championship team in those days, and Willis Reed was one of the best players in the NBA. This story begins in 1972 and ends with how I got to meet Willis Reed. The phone rang at my home on a November evening right before dinner. The call was from my older cousin. He said he had just been handed 2 tickets to the Knicks game that night. He went on to say that a co-worker of his mother, my aunt, had given her 2 tickets to that night's Knicks game. He'd go and wanted to know if my brother or I wanted that second ticket. But there was a snag. Me and my brother were both Knicks fans, and we both wanted to go to the game. During dinner, we tried to figure out a fair way to decide who would get the second ticket. Flipping a coin didn't seem right. The tension mounted. Finally, my brother said, "You're my younger brother. This might be your only chance ever to see your favorite player, Willis Reed, in action. You go." "Are you sure?" I said. "Yes. Now get ready before I change my mind." Even though I lived in northern New Jersey, right across the river from New York City, the game was starting in about 2 hours, and there wasn't any time to waste. I finished my dinner and ran out the door, waiting for my cousin to pick me up. It was my first time in Madison Square Garden. I was 10 years old and in awe of the place. We looked for our seats. As we got closer and closer to the court, I figured we must be lost. Then my cousin turned to me and said, "Can you believe this? These are our seats. We're in the 10th row." I thought I had died and gone to heaven. The Knicks were playing the Milwaukee Bucks that night. The Bucks had won the NBA title just 18 months earlier. Not only did they have Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, but they had also acquired future Hall of Famer Oscar Robertson from the Cincinnati Royals. It was going to be a fierce battle. Robertson would be going up against Earl the Pearl Monroe, another future Hall of Famer. The Knicks had acquired Monroe from the Baltimore Bullets. But the battle I was most interested in was Reed versus Jabbar. Reed, slowed by injuries, was not quite the player he was before, but he got the better of Jabbar that night. The Knicks reeled off 19 straight points at game's end to win. That night, I drove back to Jersey with my cousin. I was on cloud 9. But unbeknownst to me at the time, there would be yet another encounter with Willis Reed. I got a call from a friend during the summer of 1973. He told me that Willis Reed was going to be at a bookstore in New York City, signing autographs and handing out pamphlets to promote his summer basketball camp. "That's nice," I said, "but we have no way of getting there." He told me his father was going and that he'd get us there. I thought he was pulling my leg. But a few days later, off we went. We walked into the bookstore, and there he was, even closer to me than when I saw him in the garden 7 months earlier. He was sitting behind a table signing autographs. We stood in line, waiting for our turn. I was nervous. What would I say? Finally, it was my turn. "Hello, Mr. Reed, you're my favorite." Before I could finish that sentence, Reed stood up. I'd never seen such a large man. I felt like an ant. He smiled, extended his hand, and asked, "What is your name?" "Mark," I said. He shook my hand and said, "Nice to meet you, Mark." I wanted to say more, but I was too much in awe. Mr. Reed sat back down, and our meeting was over. I still have that autograph. I wish that I had a camera that day, but it was 1973 after all, long before people carried cameras with them everywhere. The 1973-74 season would be Willis Reed's last year. The Knicks finished 49-33, but lost in the playoffs. Injuries had taken a toll, and Reed retired before the start of the 1974-75 season. Dave DeBusschere retired too. Without Reed and DeBusschere, the Knicks finished the season 40-42. After Reed retired, I lost my interest in basketball. But for 6 years of my youth, from 1969 to 1974, the Knicks and Willis Reed were a big part of my life.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
We here at the Sports History Network proudly partner with 26 podcasts, all revolving around the history of sports. But did you know that many of our hosts were sports history authors way before they started their shows? It's true. We've got Joe Ziemba, host of When Football Was Football, Joe Zagurski, host of Pro Football in the 1970s, Mark Morthier, host of Yesterday Sports, Tommy Phillips, host of Lombardi Memories, and Scott Adamson, co-host of From the 55-Yard Line. All these authors have many books for you to choose from. To check them out, go to our website at sportshistorynetwork.com/sportshistorybooks. Pick up your copy today. Soundtrack provided by Kevin MacLeod of filmmusic.io.